The Sun Devils have their 2025 football schedule, and get ready for ASU to have another home sweep.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very exciting podcast for you today because the 2025 schedule has arrived for the Sun Devils. I got to let you know, we are sweeping the home schedule this year, but the away schedule, kind of interesting. No consecutive games. We'll talk about that later before I give you my final overall thoughts to cap off the show. Home schedule, though, looking pretty good. ASU has 7 home games this year. Love that for us. You have, in order, NAU to open the season on August 30th. That one we already knew. September 13th, you will be hosting Texas State. That is going to be closing out your non-conference play. September 27th will be your Big 12 home opener against TCU. October 18th, that's going to be off of a bye and off of an away game. We talk about the away games later, is going to be Texas Tech. Houston comes up on October 25th. That is the only instance where ASU has consecutive home games this year. November 15th, which again is going to be coming off of a bye week for ASU, is West Virginia. And then they close the season either the 28th or 29th of November. We don't know for sure. We just know that's going to be the weekend, the last weekend, the rivalry weekend against Arizona. This is a really, really good slate for ASU. So it's going to be a tough schedule. Overall, if you look at this schedule, you are facing some really good teams from a year ago. We're going to talk later about Iowa State, who is probably your toughest away game. You're also going to be visiting Colorado and Baylor. Those 3 teams all finished in the top 5 of the rankings for ASU. Your other road game is going to be against Utah, who finished near the bottom, but I do think Utah is in for a bounce back year. We'll talk about that later. Your other away game is Mississippi State, your lone out of conference away game. I feel good about that one, especially based off of last year, and I don't know how much better they're going to be this year. We will talk about the away games in the next segment. This is a really good home slate for ASU. We've known who you're hosting for a while, but the way it was set up, I think is really good. My first big takeaway here is you are getting all of the Texas teams out of the way before November. That's ideal for me to get 3 of your tougher games, technically 4 if you want to include Texas State, but focusing more on the Big 12, you're getting 3 of your tougher games out of the way before November when it's going to be crunch time. Now, November is admittedly a tougher part of the schedule, but I do think that you could come out of the home slate here against Texas in very good shape, and it will be 4 consecutive home games against Texas schools. 3 of them will be Big 12 teams. You obviously have Texas State. That will be closing out your non-conference games. They got the win last year. Was it San Marcos or San Marcos? I think it was San Marcos. Apologies. I don't remember. And then TCU is coming to town. That's your Big 12 opener. This is the first time that you will play TCU in the Big 12. You did not see them last year. I am high on TCU. I think they're going to be a much improved team this year. Then you will have Texas Tech for consecutive games. That is the only instance this year, by the way, where you have consecutive home games on the schedule. Everything else is split pretty evenly. You're going to get some revenge, or at least you have an opportunity to get some revenge on Texas Tech, who I think is a budding rival for ASU. And there's we'll talk in just a moment about my predictions for some potential, what are they called? Jersey combinations. We'll talk about that in a second. Then you have Houston to close out your Texas slate in the season in 2025. I think Houston will be better. I'm still not super high on Houston. It's also, they were 3-6 in conference play last year, and they came on hot to end of the season. I'm not discounting or counting out Houston this year, but you do get them at home to establish the way that this rivalry, I suppose, is going to get set up. It's your first time playing Houston. You close the season. Your last 2 home games are going to be West Virginia, and obviously Territorial Cup makes its return to Tempe this year. West Virginia, they are better than people realize, despite the fact that they were middle of the pack in the Big 12 a year ago. They were 6-6 in the regular season, had a loss in their bowl game, but they were 5-4 in conference play. So they did a really good job of playing up to their competition in the Big 12 last year. And they've got a new head coach. Rich Rod is returning to West Virginia. Very exciting for them. As far as I know, Mountaineer fans seem to be receptive to it. I'm excited for it because I like Rich Rod. I thought he was a quality coach during his time with West Virginia a handful of years ago. And then when he made his way to U of A, that was when Todd Graham and him were establishing the new era of that rivalry. And we owned Rich Rod for the most part. I want to say we were 3-2 against him. Our 2 losses came in Tucson, but we really dominated the wins that we had over Rich Rod. So I'm very welcoming of him coming back. And I love that in his first season, he is going to Tempe. Welcome home. That's going to be a loud game. And then U of A, I'm still not high on them. I think they got significantly worse this offseason. Fafita's back. That's awesome. Tedero McMillan is gone. Who's the corner? Sicario Davis is gone. Jacob Manu is gone. Some of their D linemen are gone. Jonas Savaiania, their offensive lineman, I probably butchered that, is gone. They have a lot of stuff that they're going to be trying to replace, and I don't think that they're going to successfully do it. Should be another win for ASU. Speaking of wins for ASU at home, what I say at the top of the show, I said ASU is sweeping. Yeah, I feel pretty good about ASU sweeping at home. 7 home games this year. NAU, Texas State, TCU, Texas Tech, Houston, West Virginia, Arizona. Like I said, you get the Texas teams out of the way before November. I love that. Get those teams taken care of because there's a chance that all 4 of those Texas teams, Texas Tech, TCU, Texas State, and Houston, there's a legitimate chance that all 4 of those teams could be bowl eligible this year. I just like the state of Texas for football this year because I also like Baylor quite a bit. And is that it? Is that the only Texas team we're not playing? That's crazy. Just in the Big 12 at least. But, I mean, outside the Big 12, I do think the Longhorns will be good again. And I think the Aggies will be what they always are, which is good until it matters the most. Texas is just going to be really strong in football this year. And the 4 teams that ASU is going to play at home, I should say, I'm a fan of the teams that get at home. I do wish Baylor was at home. We'll talk about Baylor coming up in a little bit, but ASU didn't draw that card to host the Bears this year. I just like that you get them out of the way early. I like that you're going to be able to go through that slate, and if you split it, is what it is. But get it out of the way early so that you can focus on your last 2 home games against what should be winnable opponents. But this slate, of 7 home games, I think ASU will go into almost all of them, if not all of them, as favorites. There's only 2 games I could see them not being the favorites, and that's TCU and Texas Tech. And those are so early in the season that it's going to be depending on how ASU looks more than those 2 teams. Because if ASU looks like they did last year, which was an 11-win football team, they're going to be favored in every single one of their home games this year. But if they come out the gate and they are 2-2, and that is your home opener for the Big 12 conference is against TCU, and TCU is as good as I think they are, yeah, you're probably not going to be favored in that. And then Texas Tech beat you last year. I think that line is going to be close. I also think Texas Tech is going to contend for the Big 12 this year. I love that team, and they did a lot of good stuff in the transfer portal this offseason. Texas Tech's going to be a tough team. Houston should be sneaky. Overall, though, I love the momentum that is going to go into 2025 after sweeping their home game schedule last year. And they played some pretty decent teams at home. BYU was their biggest game. They got that win. They beat Utah. They beat Kansas, 2 teams that were predicted to really contend in the Big 12. Kansas came on late. Utah was not that good, is what it is. I loved the way that ASU was able to sweep their home games last year, and they have a chance to do it again this year. I love the slate. I love the way it was set up for ASU. And I just think that these opponents are all beatable for ASU. Although, spoiler alert, I do think that ASU is just better than every team in the Big 12. Call me biased or call me a realist, looking at a team that is bringing everyone back and is coming off of a Big 12 championship and a really, really good game in the playoff. Yeah, I like ASU's chances. They would be, at that point, establishing one of the best home field advantages in the Big 12. If you are coming off consecutive seasons where you are undefeated at home, yeah, by 2026, teams are going to look at ASU and they're going to go, I don't want to go to Tempe. Plus, this Valley's activated, man. It was loud last year at Mountain America Stadium. If you continue to win in that stadium, things are only going to get consecutively better for you. And then we look at 2026 and beyond, and it's like, yeah, that might be the best home field advantage in the Big 12. Who would have thought? Really interested about these consecutive road games, or lack thereof, I should say. Coming up next, this is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to talk to you guys about our friends over at Game Time. If you're looking for tickets for your next big event, now you can take a look, or at least pretty soon, for tickets for the ASU home schedule. Whenever they come out, I should say, use Game Time, because Game Time, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or an ASU game, it's the best place to get the right ticket for the right price. Get rid of any kind of headache you might have looking anywhere else. With Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, and you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Time Picks for a while now, and I love it, especially because I used it for my Big 12, or not my Big 12, my college football playoff game that I was able to go to out in Georgia. Like I said, I got to see the best tickets. I didn't have to sift through stuff. I got to see how my seat looked before I even hit buy, so I knew what to expect when I got there. It was great value. It was a steal. I also knew the total up front. There was no surprise fees at checkout. And of course, Game Time's lowest price guarantee means if you find a better deal somewhere else, they will refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation offers if anything comes up. Ready to make the next event you go to even better. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. That's code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDCOLLEGE. Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you, every single one of you, for tuning in to make Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. The upcoming away game schedule. There's some tough away games. There are. In fact, of your 4 away games, I think that I will say 3 of them, or 5 away games. 5 away games. What am I talking about? Of your 5 away games, I think all but one of them should be difficult. That one being Mississippi State. And I could be wrong. It's an SEC team. That's what they told me last year. But Baylor, I have already picked Baylor to be the runner-up in the Big 12. I don't know if I've officially put it out on the podcast. I've been very vocal on the podcast about how much I like Baylor. But I do think that as of right now, ASU will be seeing Baylor in the Big 12 championship game in 2025. That's tough, and it's even tougher that that's the way that both of these teams will be opening up the Big 12 conference slate. That's going to be a tone establisher for both of these teams. If I am correct and I am predicting these teams to go to the Big 12 championship, we're going to look back to early in the season. We're going to see what happened. There's history across sports, football especially. It is hard to beat the same team twice in one year. We'll have to see. Going to Utah, you are familiar with Salt Lake City. That's a very good thing. Very early in October, it's not going to be a cold weather game. It'll be a little chillier, but more than manageable for ASU. And again, they're really, really familiar with Rice-Eccles Stadium. I expect Utah to be much better this time around. Cam Rising is gone at quarterback. They got the kid from New Mexico who's coming in. Kyle Whittingham is still there. The coaching staff is pretty much intact. Defense is always going to be good. Utah should be better this year, but you get them early on. The back end, that's tough. November 1st, you're going to Iowa State. November 22nd, you're going to Colorado. Colorado will be your final away game of the season. Before we get that far, because I want to talk about those two games specifically, the bye weeks. ASU has 2 bye weeks this year, October 4th, November 8th. What I love, first of all, is the bye weeks are later in the year. Talk about that towards the end of the show as well. The game before October 4th is going to be against TCU. Then you have your bye week, and then you will visit Utah. So you will get an extra chance to prepare for Utah, who I do think will be better than a year ago, and you should be ready to go. November 8th, that one is a little more unideal. You're going to Iowa State on November 1st, and then you will have your bye week, and then you return home to host West Virginia. If you lose the Iowa State game, you got some time to regather, regroup, get ahead of your frustration, and then take it out on West Virginia. I would have rather switched it and have played West Virginia on November 1st and then had the bye week and then host or visit Iowa State. I would prefer to have the bye weeks before my away games, but that wasn't going to happen. Nonetheless, I do love that they're later in the year. There's no consecutive road games, by the way. That is a huge, huge deal for ASU. NAU will lead into Mississippi State. First road game of the year. You'll be coming off your first win of the year and more than likely a big win. TCU leads into Utah. That is also going to be coming off of a bye week. I didn't put this in my notes for some reason. But that is important that you will have a home game, a bye week, and then Utah. The thing I didn't have in my notes here was you will be going from Texas State at home to visiting Baylor. You could be starting the season 3-0. I would imagine you start the season 3-0. You go to Waco and you want to prove that, hey, you know, we're not the Cinderella team. We're here to stay. Let's go ahead and start the year 1-0 in Big 12 play. And it's arguably your biggest challenge on the schedule this year. Arguably. Houston will lead into Iowa State. Again, we're going to talk about Iowa State here in a second. And then West Virginia leads into Colorado. There is only one road game, by the way, in the month of October. You will have 3 home games, a bye week, and then 1 road trip. That road trip, by the way, is Utah. Otherwise, you got the bye week on October 4th. You will be visiting Utah. You will host Texas Tech, and then you will host Houston. I lied. It is 3 games and a bye week. That's still good, though. And that one of your road trips is Utah. Again, I anticipate them to be better this year. I really like that. There's a chance that you could find a way to only lose 1 game in October between Utah and Texas Tech. And I'm not sleeping on Houston. I do think Houston could be better, but that should be a win as of now. All right, let's talk about those cold weather games. Iowa State, Colorado. Iowa State, November 1st, Colorado on November 22nd. 2 really good football teams. Iowa State has revenge on their mind. Colorado wants to prove that they're not going to flop after losing Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, as well as several other players. And I don't think Colorado is going to drop to the bottom of the conference. I don't think they're going to seriously contend again, but I think that is a team with a winning record that should surprise. Okay. These are cold weather games. You're somewhat used to Colorado. You're 4-2 all time when you go to Boulder. There's only been 1 road game in November. It was a win, a big win, 51-17 in 2012. That's a long time to go and not play a game in Boulder in the month of November. I looked at the weather from last year. Boulder in the month of November had 7 days of snow, a total of 13 inches of snow. I don't know if that's a lot because I live in Arizona. That feels like a pretty decent amount. That will be interesting. Also, the average temperature in November for Colorado last year was a high of 55 degrees and a low of 30. Unless it's snowing, that's super manageable for ASU. Iowa State, this is the one of all the road games, this is the one that intimidates me the most. I do think Baylor is going to be a tough game, but at least it's early in the year. Iowa State, this is tough. You've never been to Ames before. This is a brand new environment. That's a loud stadium, and they're coming off a great year. They're going to be really, really loud. This is also a get-back game for them. So that's going to be a sold-out stadium plus a little bit more. The average temperature, before that, they only had 1 total day of snow last year. I could not find in their weather report how many inches of snow they got. I saw 0. I don't think that's right unless it was just like a flurry or something. But there's a lot of mist. There's a lot of rain, light rain, a lot of wind, a lot of cold weather. This is a cold weather game for ASU. The high last year on average was 49 degrees. The low was 28. And this is going to depend on what time the game is. If you have a 4 o'clock kickoff, and what would that be? A 5 o'clock kickoff in Ames at that point in the year, because daylight saving will be off, you could be seeing a game in the mid to low 30s with flurries, with mist, with rain. That is unideal. And that's going to be really tough for a team that's got revenge on their mind. I don't know if I like that game to be a slam dunk win. I certainly don't like it to be the blowout that you delivered last year. Really, really interesting with those 2 road games in particular. Overall, though, I do think that the schedule matched up pretty well for ASU. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, thanks to all of you for tuning in to make us your first listen of the day, and a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. My final overall thoughts for this schedule. 3 takeaways is where we will start. First takeaway, home game schedule. It is perfect. It is a perfect setup for their home games. There are no long breaks in between, first of all. Last year, we went almost a month without a home game. We had Kansas and Utah, but there was breaks in between And then they had a bye week. They had a road game. They might have had 2 road games, honestly. It was a long stretch of time because I remember talking to some of the people that I see. Funny enough, Michelle Gardner was the one that I was talking to about this, and I was laughing. I was like, I'll see you in a month. Like, I was short on cash last year. I was not able to make it to any road games, so I just laughed. I was like, I'm not going to see you guys for a minute. Take care. There are no lulls like that this year. There's August 30th, 1 week break, and then September 13th. Pretty good. There is September 20th and then September 27th, only a 1 week difference. Then you will have a bye week where you'll be at home. You will visit Utah, and then you return home for the next 2 games against TCU and Houston. Then you will travel to Iowa State. You have a bye week, so you will return home from your bye week, and then you will host West Virginia. Your last away game is at Colorado, and then you host Arizona. No consecutive road games. And it is set up outside of that Iowa State game, which is a very intimidating game for me. Everything is set up pretty nicely to where ASU should be able to go into their road games with some kind of momentum. Mississippi State, you should be riding high off your first win of the year. Baylor, you could be 3-0 to start, and you want to establish the tone with Big 12 play. Utah, you are coming off a bye week, and it'd be your 3rd Big 12 game. We'll see what your record is. Iowa State, I got nothing. That's just tough. You'll have 2 consecutive home games before that, but then you've got that problem. And then before Colorado is a bye week, and then West Virginia, you're going to want to close out your away schedule on a high note before you return home for the Territorial Cup. I think that those away games, which is my second takeaway, ended up being perfectly spaced out for ASU. You also have 2 of your 5 road games before October. You have 1 away game in the month of October. So you have a road game September 6th and September 20th. And then you have 1 road game in October on the 11th. You are really set up. And then there's only 2 more road games that year, but it's your cold weather games. That's going to lead into my third takeaway before I hand you my final thoughts is those 2 games are cold weather, true cold weather games, and there is snow. There is a very realistic chance for snow in those games. Here's the good news. You are familiar with Boulder, Colorado. You have been playing Colorado for the better part of 15 years, almost 20 years. I can't remember when Colorado joined the Pac-12. RIP. You're familiar, and you've gone there in October where it's cooler. You've only been there once in November. You got to win. It's been over a decade since you went to Boulder in November. 7 days last year, it snowed 13 total inches of snow. That will be interesting. And then Iowa State, you have no familiarity with Ames, Iowa. You've never been there before. It is cold. It is rainy. There's fog. The fog is what intimidates me, man, because there was a lot of fog in Ames last year. That's going to be an incredibly tough game. If Iowa State is not the toughest game on the schedule for ASU, it's Baylor, but you get Baylor your second road game of the year and your first game of Big 12 play. Iowa State, that is undoubtedly your most difficult game on the schedule. So I love that the home games are set up perfectly with no long breaks in between. I also love, I mentioned this earlier, that you get all your Texas teams before November. Your away games, they are perfectly spaced out. But final takeaway there was you got 2 legitimate cold weather games. It would have been more preferred if you could have Baylor and Utah as your November games, but it is what it is. All right, my final thoughts here, which is where we're going to wrap up. 2025, let's try that again, is a perfect schedule for ASU. Perfect. Everything down to the last minute details. Drop a comment if you understand that reference. There's perfect spacing. The bye weeks, I love where they're set up, especially because they are later in the season. You get a bye week to start October, and you get a bye week before your final 3 games in November. Get healthy. ASU last year was very fortunate to not have significant injuries till the end of the year when they lost Jordan Tyson. That was a healthy team for the majority of the year. You should be able to find that again this year with Lady Luck on your side, but with the spacing of those bye weeks, and especially one in November, the ASU is making a push for the playoff, which they will, or at least they should. Then having that late bye week to get ready for your last 3 regular season games and then potentially going into the Big 12 championship game, that's great news for you. When I look at that start of the season, those first 8 games, NAU, Mississippi State, Texas State, Baylor, TCU, Utah, Texas Tech, Houston. You could be 8-0. You could be 8-0. Now, there are a handful of games in there that will be tough. Baylor, TCU, Utah, Texas Tech. 4 straight games. Those will be tough, hard-earned games. A worst case is you split them 4-4. I'd be dead shocked if they split to 4-4. You could be 8-0. I could see 7-1, maybe 6-2. I don't know. It is a tough end to the season, though. A very tough end. The cold weather games, I cannot emphasize enough that game in Ames against Iowa State. That is a very intimidating game. And then an underrated game is going to be West Virginia. I talked about them a little bit. I'm excited for them. I think that they are going to be a bowl team again, but I think that they're going to be a really tough out for the Big 12 this year. I don't know that they contend for the Big 12. If you ask me right now, I would say no. But they went 5-4 last year. I don't see them being worse than 5-4. We'll wait and see. This is a perfect schedule, though. This is absolutely perfect. What do you guys think? Do you like the schedule? Which game are you looking forward to the most? Which game are you going to make it out to this year? Road game, home game, whatever. Let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter, Richie Bradshaw36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, hit subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate each and every single one of you for making us your first listen of the day. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Tomorrow, we will have our Bobby Hurley episode. There is an ASU basketball game tonight against Kansas State. It is the perfect segue into Bobby Hurley. Following Bobby Hurley, we're going to talk about this schedule more because I'm going to give you my way too early win and loss predictions for the upcoming season for the Sun Devils. I will catch you guys later, and until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.